expansions, but they were also standalone games. So like I bought Nightfall first and I had Nightfall. Then I had to go back and buy the other two as well in order to have access to them and play them. So it was like standalone games, but they mixed in. It was interesting, but it was a hell of an introduction because it was like once you opened up the map, I remember opening the map and going, "Oh my god, this world is huge," because it's the fog of war over the map, and then as you run through it, you open up like that section of it. And the original Guild Wars puts you in a setting and then literally destroys the world at like level 5 and rebuilds it. And then you spawn into this world and you're like, what the hell? This is so big. And I was playing with a group of my really my closest friends back in the day. There were 4 of us that were kind of running around and had no idea what we were doing. And it was funny. Like we had the dumbest builds. Like the character combinations were so terrible and they were so useless. And we didn't know any of this until way too late, until we'd already made our characters and we were screwed.
Yeah.
But that was where I got my start, man, was the early on in the Guild Wars life cycle.
I think the thing that really sold MMOs for me is not just the massive world that you get to play in, but so many games, even today, single player games, all the conversation is about, oh, yeah, it's a giant world, but how do they make it feel like a living, breathing game? Everyone applauded Red Dead Redemption 2 for doing a great job of having random events that make the world feel alive. You want the world to feel alive, put 1 billion humans in it.
Yeah. That's definitely, I think, the way to achieve that. So, Rudo, because I haven't really even dove into the world of MMORPGs until very, very recently. I've been scared of them for a lot of the reasons I think a lot of people are, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. But Rudo, why don't you give us, since it was kind of around that same time, your earliest memories and introduction and what that was like getting to know this unique type of gaming experience?
First of all, I see Vaguely Sober saying EVE Online in the chat. EVE Online is not even a video game. That is like a mining and economy simulator.
Yeah, Wall Street thing.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Some legendary stories of some underhanded shit that people have done to each other.
Definitely some crazy stuff. Like literally thousands of real life dollars lost in that game. But my first experience was, as many people around my age, World of Warcraft, the first MMO that I ever played. I got into Classic relatively late, but close enough. I didn't quite make it to 60 because, much like AJ's experience, I was a kid who was brand new to this type of game, had no idea what I was doing playing with a couple of friends. I played a warrior my first time through, and at one point I was out leveling my friend by a little bit, and our conclusion that we came to was, oh, warriors must just level faster for some reason. Nope.
A totally logical conclusion.
Right? So clearly had no idea what I was doing back then. My life in MMOs has come a very, very long way. I've spent many, many years playing MMOs at an extremely hardcore level since then. But yeah, that was the first game for me that really allowed myself to fully immerse myself in the game. Like, it's still the case that MMOs are one of the only games in the world where I can forget that I exist in the real world. Having played plenty of other games, playing lots of Halo growing up, game is fun, super intense, you're into it, but then you die in that game and you remember that you're holding a controller and you're not out there fighting. In an MMO,
And if you're like me, when you hold that controller after dying, there's a temptation to break it.
See how well that controller does. Yeah, I totally see what you're talking about there, Rudo, because like I said, I haven't gotten into this, and it was basically only pulled in because my favorite video game franchise of all time finally made a really good one. And actually, people will tell you that Final Fantasy XI was a really good one. But that's part of where, so that came out like in the early 2000s, right? And I didn't have the internet access. I didn't have a PC that could run it. And you could technically do it on your PlayStation 2, but like online MMORPG gaming on your PS2, can you imagine?
No, I actually did that with Final Fantasy XI for a little while. It was awful.
Yeah. And that was exactly my experience. And then in addition to that, I do get immersed in the single player experience pretty deeply. I do like a lot of, the story driven games, Halo being one of them, obviously the Final Fantasies or whatever. And so I never felt the need to I'm scared of big maps and of interacting with other human beings online who might be particularly friendly. And you run into that in the MMO community a lot, right? Or even the idea that I've got to be social with people in order to achieve my end game goals, where there are times it's like, I would really rather not have to team up with people to do this. And even though I enjoy other people being in the world. So it was a scary thing, man. It was tough to get past because there is that element of if I do something wrong in this dungeon, are people going to yell at me for being a noob and an idiot and not understand? And I've played all of the base game of Final Fantasy XIV and its first expansion now, Heaven's Ward, and I'm still not convinced that I am actually playing the game correctly, that I'm playing my class correctly, that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in dungeons and stuff. And it's not everyone totally gets it. It can be a tough community to get into.
So there is a very big schism in the World of Warcraft community, and newer players to the game won't understand this because a couple of expansions ago, they merged all PvE and PvP servers, and they had this thing called War Mode, if you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. There used to be PvE servers, which were focused on players versus monsters, players versus environment. And then there were PvP servers where you could still do all of the players versus environment stuff. There was just also world PvP. I grew up on a PvP server. So there are certain zones in the game where it's just an accepted fact that if you're not a max level character, you are going to die and die and die at the hands of other players ad infinitum, just forever. It's just part of the game. And if that's the way you were raised on the game, you just accept it and you just live with it. If you were raised on a PvE server and you tried to go to a PvP server, you couldn't handle it. It was the worst experience of your life.
So Guild Wars was a PvP. Its development was built. Its PvP systems were built first, and then they realized nobody's gonna buy this, and so they built the MMO around the PvP game that they had made, and it's why the PvP in Guild Wars is so good.
Yeah.
And any longtime Guild Wars player will tell you that the true end game of Guild Wars is PvP. You go through the game, you learn how to play it, you learn all the skills, you learn the builds, you learn all the stuff, right? And all it is just training ground for PvP. And then you get into PvP, and it is the hardest goddamn thing I've ever played. It is the interrupt system and the baiting of people and the interactions, and it's oh, this is a quarter-second cast, and this guy still interrupted this and just shut down my entire bar, and I'm just sitting here as this hammer warrior crams it up my ass because that guy just shut me down. And it was a skill thing. That guy just dominated you. And it was tremendous, the challenge involved in learning the PvP aspect of it. And that was after thousands of hours of playing through the games and the campaigns and different classes and all the shit. It was such a breath of fresh air to be this game is really hard again.
Chat has kind of been money tonight. Cygnus's comment here about only playing 2 MMOs currently. If you're taking playing an MMO seriously, that's the only game you can play. Like that,
Yeah.
You don't have time to play other video games because you need to spend all of your free time playing an MMO. And that's a terrible thing sometimes, but it's also reality.
Totally. And as I've learned recently, not even if you're just doing it for all of the gameplay reasons, which I had done before, but, you know, Katie, my girlfriend Caitlin, has like mostly doesn't pay attention to the video games when they're on, where I think I've mentioned before, she's gotten into Pokemon Go. Then she advanced to Bug Snacks. She's almost beaten Bug Snacks completely without me even basically noticing. She's just totally into that game. And then the story for Final Fantasy 14, you know, for the base game, it was all right. It got really good in Heavens. Now she's hooked on the story. It's literally the only game that we can play because we've only got time for that. You keep going. It doesn't stop. It doesn't end. It's like we're now binge watching a television show as much as anything. And there's no time to go away from this thing. Because, and then when we're not running through the story, when she's like at work or I've got a little extra time to game, it's like I could do something else. But when she gets home, I better have the good equipment so that when we get to the next boss fight, we can get through that really quick and then get to the next big storyline moment. It's like, oh, it's just become what we do now.
Yeah, I play WoW with my wife now, and AJ and I and her and Z as well are in a guild that kills bosses 2 days a week, and without us now because we have to cover hockey. But you know, they out there killing bosses. Drew, did you play Final Fantasy 14 like super recently, or did you ever play the first iteration of it?
So I did not play the game when it was objectively terrible.
Yeah,
when it first launched, and there's
this
a
is what blows me
phenomenal
away, man. You got a gaming PC after all these years, and you're like, I got to play Final Fantasy 14.
All right. Well, I mean, you know, yeah. But it's really, really, really good is the reason why. And I've learned that. But it is amazing that it went from an objective disaster, like unplayable, like the menus you couldn't navigate. You could almost not play the game. And of course, they admitted that. Go on YouTube and just go like Final Fantasy 14 Rebirth documentary or Reborn documentary, something like the when they relaunched it, they called it A Realm
World Reborn.
It is it is amazing what the development people at that company did and the way they worked with the fans to say, we're really sorry about this. We promise we're going to make something good. Through on that, we got this comment here from Anime as Leaders saying, I haven't even gotten to the good parts yet. And I've had a lot of people tell me that after Heaven's Ward, it just keeps getting better and better. Now they have a trick they can pull on, because Final Fantasy can pull on almost 30 years of their own history and throw nostalgia and super fun things from their at you whenever they want. World of Warcraft has done that. Now they've built it from the ground up just through World of Warcraft and through, I guess, the expanded Warcraft universe and stuff as well. But where you can do those things, but it is amazing how they went from this totally broken game to something that now I'm legitimately addicted to playing all the time. And every time we sit down for a 2 or 3 hour play session, it feels totally worth it. We're glad we've subbed to it, you know, that we've spent the money, that we've spent our time there. It's completely rewarding. And this is as somebody who's been scared of MMOs for most of my life.
Yeah, it's if you're a world building nerd, a lore nerd, MMOs, and you're not playing MMOs, like, you're just doing it wrong. All right. Like, look, I have a World of Warcraft book right here. There's like 30 something books. So the WoW extended universe is approaching like Star Wars levels of complexity at this point. And it's just awesome to get lost in the content like that.
You know how easy it is for me to ignore all of that?
Super easy. A PvP player here, of course, just wants to kill stuff.
And it's funny because I don't play WoW PvP.
Yeah.
But I won't. And I have no interest.
Horde.
Yeah, of course. Basic self-respect.
Yeah.
I have no interest in the PvP in WoW. All I want to do is party up with friends and do like mythic dungeons and raids. That's it. It's literally it's what I think about. Just like, This is what I'm going to do. And everything builds to that. Going after gear, doing quests, leveling stuff up, whatever. It's all about doing that at a better level.
Yeah, everyone likes RPG chores until you don't. It's kind of one of those things.
They all have about this. I wanted to make this a
the shift into daily, like here's your stuff that you do every day. Where it's like, I always tell Z, I'm like, I haven't done my WoW chores for today. I gotta hop on and do those. And it's just like you run around, you spend like an hour just doing the daily things, you get them all done.
Yeah.
I like it. For me, I like it because I also know it's completely optional, and I'm totally comfortable not doing them when I don't want to do them.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about this in general. I think I may have not gotten the most or whatever out of the original Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, is they really lean into this with jobs that they allow you to go out and do. The crafting system is just stupid deep. You can go out, there's like 3 different jobs for going out into the world and collecting materials, right? And then a bunch of different jobs for what you do with those materials once you've collected them. And you can just do that forever. You don't even have to engage in combat. Like you could literally just, and you wouldn't get through the story or whatever, though each one of those jobs has their own story that comes with it. And I got to a point where it's exactly what Rudo said. I was having an absolute blast doing it right up until I was like, have I spent like 200 hours of my life mining fake ore so that I can build fake armor so that I can wear into battle, like occasionally, because I'm too busy going out and finding the next raw materials to craft into? Like, it's amazing how they managed to. Like, I would never go fishing. I'm not a big guy for going fishing in real. Actually, I don't like fishing in video games either. Come to think of it, fishing is the one of the chores that I've never got since Breath of Fire, the original.
No, you're getting kicked out, AJ. Fishing sucks,
dude. Fishing IRL blows. Fishing in video games,
no, it's just as bad. It's just as bad.
There's something about it that I'm just like, I'll do this. I'll sit.
All right, chat.
I don't know why.
Fishing, yay or nay?
And I will say it depends a lot on the game, because if it's like Zelda fishing, pretty good time. I like Zelda fishing. If it's like WoW fishing,
sit there and wait 8 to 15 seconds to click a button.
So what I do is I do that while I'm doing something else.
Do you have like an alert set up for it to bob
and
or
so
whatever?
So that when it bobs, it goes ba-da-da-dun.
Yeah.
And so I just click on it. But otherwise I have something on the other monitor rolling that I'm completely doing something else. But I have it so that I can do this. Yeah. I do not mind fishing in video games most of the time.
I don't like fishing almost ever in video games. The only fishing I like is Animal Crossing, because I'm just trying to collect all the fish.
I mean, but that's just a game.
But yeah, MMOs have it down to a science now of like, they know just about how long they can go. And then it's like, oh, you've unlocked the next level of ore that you can go out into the world and find now, or whatever. And it just keeps you on the infinite treadmill for eternity.
Yeah.
It doesn't, that's not even touching. Someone earlier mentioned that you can 100% play the stock market with like the auction houses in WoW and trading gold, and people make millions of gold a day in World of Warcraft, and it's like absurd this kind of stuff you can do with that. But and I think that's part of the ultimate draw of MMOs, is you are limited to the systems in the game, but especially to someone new to MMOs, it feels like you can go out into the world and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can quest, you can dungeon, you can just do professions, whatever. You can sit and trade chat and be a troll if you want.
Well, in WoW, they have full RP servers, which we are on. A little interesting.
We played Horde, so we didn't ever have to go to Goldshire.
The first time, my first character that I was leveling up, running around with Z, we rolled into a town and there were people who had like a full-blown script and like
that's
amazing. And like they were into it, and I've been on the internet a long time in my life, and my initial instinct was I have to ruin everyone's fun.
Let me tell you,
it was I have to troll this as hard as I can, and Z was like, just leave them alone.
Let them be.
They're not hurting you. They're having fun. They're doing what they want to do. Just leave them alone. And I was like,
they're hurting me. Trust me.
I was like,
someone step on this anthill.
Dialogue.
All right.
This is physically painful. I have to ruin this.
Whatever you've seen, it gets so much worse, man. Trust me. They gave Hunter's Eyes of the Beast back in this expansion, and that was the worst decision ever made in the history of video games. So
that means nothing to me.
Good.
So,
you don't want to know what that means.
All I know is that she talked me off the ledge and brought out my better angels that day. And one of the many reasons I love her is she pushes me to be the best version of me and not give in to the horrible instincts that just want to ruin other people's day because I don't like what they're doing. That's amazing. And then I actually, like, there are times where, like, I'm flying through Ouroboros and they're just, like, lined up and they're doing something and I'm like, you guys are weird, but I respect it. Do your thing, weirdos. Please don't talk to me.
Yeah. So, 14 has been basically made so that other than the big dungeons, you can play it as a solo experience. But there is that thing that I know, and I know a lot of people don't, and you don't have to. If you choose all the PvP stuff, you can do all the extra stuff. But one of the things is that there are always people there. It goes back to what Rudo was talking about, that feeling of the world lived in, right? And so for someone like me who prefers not to have to interact with people, I can choose to. I've thought about joining guilds a couple of times. I've been invited to. I'm just scared. It's like, believe it or not, as social as I am, I have a kind of social anxiety that I'm not, always super down to.
I recommend you do, man. I will recommend this to anyone playing an MMO. I know it's scary. I know it's weird, but joining a guild will legitimately change the way you play the game. It's a totally different world.
I joined a PvE guild when I was playing Guild Wars, made a couple of friends that I am still friends with to this day, have hung out with IRL. I ended up running a GVG guild, which was Guild versus Guild, which was like 8 versus 8 PvP back then. And I ended up running a GVG guild. We had practices and rotations, and we had all this stuff. I had personal training sessions with everybody set up every week. It was a whole thing, right? And one, it's a hell of a lot of work. So do not. It's why I do not do it now. I had no life back then, and there was nothing going on in my world, so I had all the time in the world to run this shit. But I tell you, the relationships that I'm still friends with all of those people. I'm still in contact with all of them to this day. And it changes it. It really, I mean, you just look at the fact that I picked up WoW and it was like Rudo and I play to get games together now. Michael in chat is in our guild on WoW. And as he's playing in his first MMO ever, he's leveling his character for the first time, and he's on his way to like losing his social life.
Let's go.
So it really is like and it's funny because it's the social element where all of us that didn't necessarily get to fit in very well, didn't have natural fits in the social environments we were forced into growing up. We get to choose these experiences. And it's like, if you have a bad time in a guild, you can tell all those people to eat your dick and leave.
Yep. Like, I've done exactly that before, man.
And be like, I never have to speak to these people again. I'll go find some people I get along with. And eventually you just will. Like, if you're friendly enough, like I'm not an extrovert, but every time I go into a dungeon or an LFR or something, I jump into something with someone and I'm very friendly. I run LFR just to give people gear.
Right.
Just
That's
to give
awesome.
people drops to help them out, because I just like helping people.
Right.
And I like that social aspect of it. You do meet, Randy, you should rebuild your gaming PC and quit whatever you're doing and come play WoW with us.
Yeah, for real.
And it really is. It's just, there's something socially satisfying about it, where I hop on there and it's comfortable. You have a Discord server that you can hang out and bullshit with whatever. You sit, you talk, you have drunken game nights with people. You not even necessarily WoW. You can play in other games now. Now you're doing other things,
Right.
Now you guys are meeting up in Vegas for an annual get together where all of you come from around the country, and there's nothing quite like an MMO to build a legitimate social circle that withstands the test of time.
Yep. 100% agree on that one. It's never been easier. It's never been easier to make those connections. Back at the start of WoW, there was no looking for group tool. You had to go sit in trade chat and spam it for an hour looking for a tank.
Dude.
And now you click a button, you AFK for 10 minutes, and you come back and you run your dungeon. If someone's cool, you say, hey, you're cool. I'll add you to my friends list.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have been, like with the AVS community, pretty stoked about how positive people have been and coming out and saying, hey, you should join the guild. Y'all are selling me on it. I think I'll have to do it. I'll have to come back and give a report, and I'll let you know. One thing is you got to get on the same servers as people. That's one thing that's been a little bit difficult. I've seen one thing, guilds, and I'm like, we don't play on the same server, and it costs me like $10 to jump servers. Yeah.
Like Guild Wars 2 attacked that problem. You can be in multiple guilds which go cross server, and you can play all the content together regardless of what server that you're on.
See that?
Like
I really wish I could have that, because it would make doing
Guild Wars
so
2
much
should have
easier.
been the best MMO ever. It should have been, and it just
did it just not get enough support and love and celebration?
No, they decided that
the ball?
they were above the holy trinity of DPS, tank, and heals, and so every class was designed to do a little bit of everything, and it doesn't feel good when you play it.
Debalanced.
It just doesn't, like, there's one ideal thing that you do for each class, and it just doesn't. They don't feel very good individually. The ideal, like the meta builds cut out 90% of the game, and it just kind of sucks.
I mean, that's, if you want to talk about the negative side of MMOs, that's the other side of it. Playing WoW at the beginning, you don't even know how to do quests. Like you don't know where to go.
Right.
There's no tools. It's just like you read the quest log and it's like, hey, go find Mankirk's wife. And you're like, okay, where is that? It could be literally anywhere.
You're like, all right, cool. I open up the map and I'm like, all right, where's Mankirk? And it's literally like opening a map in a city and being like, where's Mankirk?
Right. That's one thing that 14 does well, arguably too well, but I needed it, right? It holds your hand so much at the beginning. They might as well, for the first 10 hours of that game, go, so you've played a bunch of really linear Final Fantasy games before and you don't understand what's happening. Here's a character to hold your hand and explain what an MMO is. Here's what, all these different things. And I do appreciate that about it. But yeah, man, it can feel overwhelming at first, but I do, as a recent convert, highly recommend, and I'm going to do it. I'll get into a guild and figure this thing out, because I do think it's the best way. And I have these like tertiary reactions with other people, like where I'll be walking through the forest and then someone will fly by on their magical fire pony dragon, and I'm like, hey, where do I get one of those?
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man. Or I play the Bard class. There are a lot of other people that do. And when you do that, you can play like whatever music you want that's in the game. You can get orchestration rolls that automatically play it. You can play whatever you want. I was like walking by and there was a group of them playing music from The Nightmare Before Christmas, just hanging out in my hometown, a group of bards. And I was like, hey, can I be in it? I haven't mastered my instrument. I don't know what I'm doing, but this is dope. That this is a thing you can just do, is just stand around playing Nightmare Before Christmas in this game. Like, it's amazing the options that are in front of you.
It's your first time in an MMO is truly special. You'll never, ever recapture that feeling. I guarantee it, because it's just a world of wonder. And
it's the perfect way to put it.
I still love MMOs, but like today, if I'm doing something in WoW and I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Okay, wowhead.com. How the fuck do I do this? Yeah. It'll give you like a step-by-step, do exactly this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, all right, I did it. Done. Next thing.
It's a lot more of a checklist, but I like Guild Wars was like that too. Before the guild, like my friends and I that used to play together, we hated the guild wiki because it ruined the figure out how to play the game aspect of it, and we really liked that. Discover the game, figure it out. The way that you captured like elite spells in that game was insane. You had to go and kill the boss that had that skill, and before the guild wiki existed, you didn't know where those bosses were. Like, you just had to like stumble upon this dude with an elite skill and be like, oh, we captured this now. And like, it was just a crazy way to build the game. And then when that stuff comes along, it's a nice resource to have, because it really is like a big quality of life.
Yeah, for sure.
Where you're like, oh, it's so nice that I can look this up, but then you become totally reliant on it.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry. He's checked out Phantasy Star. Don't even worry about that.
Yeah, I've already been plenty into Phantasy Star.
But yeah, there's just a special feeling. Not even like things like that when you're still learning the game and something about the class you're playing just clicks in your mind all of a sudden. Like, you start to understand fundamentally how to play the game a little bit better, and it just
still waiting on that for Fire Mage.
But I will say, I joked earlier about not knowing mine, but you're right. I certainly know it better than I did at the beginning of A Realm Reborn. I understand, and I looked some stuff up on the FF14
wiki. Dude. Watch YouTube videos. I watch YouTube video on the how-tos and like the ins and outs of things, and because it feels great when you're like learning a class and you're putting all this time into it, and it's just like, I feel like something's off here. I feel like I'm missing something. Like, and then it like locks into place, and so you see how it's supposed to be done, and then you do it, and it's just like, oh my god, like this feels amazing.
Right. Every time I finish a dungeon without dying, I just turn to Kate and go, I didn't mess up. Look, I didn't do anything. No, we did it the whole time. I didn't screw up the party. Hooray.
It's
It's. I was going to say, go ahead, Rudo.
No, you're good.
Because you were talking about the world of wonder, and I had just said something. I guess it was a couple of weeks ago. It might have been on that panel Star Wars conversation we did with Trey and Will and Cora, and I've always thought of spec-fic, right? Speculative fiction, which broadly incorporates science fiction and fantasy. That's what most of us get out of it. That's what it's for. It's that sense of wonder. Is AJ laughing at me or the comments? I'm not sure yet.
Something else entirely.
All right. I was going to say, or something on Twitter. We'll get an update from AJ in a minute. But, I really think that's, whether you're going back to the original, Hercules and Odysseus and these stories, the myths, the legends, comic books, speculative fiction, it's all about that wonder. And because in those genres, kind of everything is on the table, you can endlessly wonder about what you might see or what happened. And walking through an MMO is like directing that wonder yourself, right? That around every time you go to a new area of the map, it's a sense of discovery. Every new character, every new class type, every new thing you can do with crafting or whatever, and it just fills you with that sense. And it's, for me, it was almost too much, but now that I understand the mechanics of it, I'm like, yeah, I could spend forever here and not even necessarily finish the story of the game, though that's what I'm most interested in. You can just hang out because around every corner is something, and you have no idea what it could be, and it could be anything.
I think part of it too is a lot of the time you don't know any better. Like the first time I ever raided in WoW, I got in a guild we had no idea what we were doing. We were going through the raid, a 10-man raid, and we killed the first boss, and we can't kill anything else. And months later, I find out, join a different guild, and it turns out that guild was absolutely horrendous at the game. But I didn't know. Like at the time, it was just like, oh, this is sweet. We just killed an infinite level boss that I have no idea. This seems incredibly difficult to me. And
there's just nothing else I've ever experienced in gaming quite like raiding.
Yeah.
Especially like the bigger the numbers too, 20, 25 people all working together to take down like a single enemy. It's just it's
literally one friggin' boss. You walk into a room and you're like, it's like you and 20 people, and you're like, okay, like imagine. Like, pick 19 people. If you happen to know 19 people who would show up, find 19 people to walk into a room with you and be like, okay, we're going to go after this one dude. And it's like the coordination involved, and like you learn. You walk in there and you get stepped on. Like, you start a fight and you're like, okay, like we're doing this thing. And then you get your ass kicked and you're like, okay, well, what happened? And then you just learn.
Yeah.
And you just keep figuring it out and you keep grinding through it. And it is legitimately, in my entire gaming life, it's one of the most satisfying things I've ever done.
Yeah, that's bad, Randy.
Was that first WoW experience was vanilla WoW on the worst guild server. Doesn't sound fun at all.
When Classic released, I think guilds leveled 1 to 60 and killed Ragnaros inside of 5 days. So,
interesting question from Meeks. What are your thoughts on the MMO character being the hero versus just another dude in the world?
I don't care.
I think a lot of people like the concept of being just another dude in the world, but if you're just another dude in the MMO world, your character can't do anything cool. You kind of it's a little bit tropey for sure, but you kind of have to force the player role into at least some level of heroism, because if you're just,
why would you be needed?
Yeah, right. Like if you're just common farmer man, like this is why I hate EVE Online, because I don't want to sit there and farm asteroids for 300 hours to even be allowed to play the game. So it's tough.
As long as I feel good in combat, I don't really care what my backstory is. I don't really mind. I enjoy the storyline of Shadowlands. I didn't really enjoy or pay a whole lot of attention to BFAs. I enjoy what's going on in Shadowlands, where the story is. I don't really know how we got here. There's a lot of characters from a lot of expansions built up here, a lot of history to get to where it is. I'm okay with that though. And I like what's going on, but it's not a major deal to me.
I mean, I think that's a great part.
Wearing my gear in the cutscene. Don't have it be like a stock thing.
Yeah.
And I think my guy wearing my character and use my goddamn name, of the voiceover can call me hero or whatever generic placeholder. Yeah, champion. I'm cool with that, but otherwise, like, cater to me.
But I think that's a great thing about MMOs. If you want to get immersed in the entire world story, you can. Yeah. But you can also just pick up whatever storylines you want to follow. Like, you don't have to follow them all. You just do, this was dope. Let's go find out more about this thing.
So there was a really fun trick, and there's a little spoilers involved here for the early part of Heaven's Ward, but that 14 pulled off with that because they were kind of having their cake and eating it too, where like for the big cinematics at the very beginning and ends of games, they would have that kind of stand-in hero protagonist. You've probably seen the character on the front of the original game, kind of brown-haired dude, just your everyday warrior of light, right? And they had that person as a stand-in. But then while you're playing the game, you do have, it's your gear, it's your character through all the big cutscenes or whatever. But then when we go to just the very end game stuff, he's there. But it turns out that dude's actually in the game now. He's a character in the game. and it's like a mirror polar opposite Warrior of Darkness versus Warrior of Light situation. I thought that was very, very clever, because I'm sure that's not what they intended to do, right? It was just, like you said, the champion or the hero, the stand-in, and you get that it's supposed to be for your character, and then they flipped that on its head and went, nope, that's actually somebody else. You're maybe not the only hero of the story.
That's one of the beauties, I think, of a continual game world. I mean, AJ and I will talk for days about how much we hate Bwanzomdi, but the WoW community loved that character, and Blizzard went, you know what? In a future patch, we'll add more content in for that type of thing, because that's what the community wants. So it's
heroes.
Shut up. It's one of those things where it's like DLC in single player games, but the DLC never stops coming. There's always something more. There's always the next thing. Even if you feel like you've done everything in the game currently, in 6 months, there'll be another patch with a whole bunch of new stuff.
Right. I can't imagine actually trying to be. Remember the word completionist back before these games, like trying to do everything in an MMO the size of WoW or 14. You can't.
That was actually a big deal in Guild Wars. So Guild Wars had titles, which were just like achievements for accomplishing certain things, and the idea was to max out as many titles as you could, and the vast majority of them were completionist. Collect all the skills in the game, collect all the elite skills in the game,
right?
Beat every dungeon in the game, beat every quest, every whatever, unlock 100% of the map. And that was hard to do. You had to actually install an extra program that showed you where on the map you were missing. I never actually got it. I'm at like 99.7% on my guy. And it was called like Cartographer. And that was a huge deal in Guild Wars, was maxing out titles.
There were what I believe to be the coolest event in video game history was the original opening of the gates of Ahn'Qiraj. It was a server-wide event on every server in World of Warcraft where both factions had to gather at what was at the time considered like obscene amounts of resources. It took some servers literally months of real life time to collect enough stuff to trigger the events of this event. And then there was a 7-day long event for the entire server where you would essentially fight a war in the open world. And it was a fucking disaster at the time. The servers would crash every 15 minutes. It was just chaos. But it created this event where at the end of it, after having done this absurd quest line that is stupid tier long, a handful of people on the server, and at the time we're talking about maybe like 15 to 20 people on these servers of thousands and thousands and thousands of players, would ring this gong to open the gates of Ahn'Qiraj, and they would get a black Ahn'Qiraji battle tank mount. And if you had one of those back in the day, you were a god among men. Yeah, like
the status symbol stuff that they give you in games is interesting, where it's like when people see it, they're like, oh. Because in Guild Wars, it was pets. They were mini pets where you could bust them out and they would like run alongside you, and they didn't do anything. They were purely just like, oh, I own these.
Yep.
And the thing was, it was about collecting them. And then you would see people who had certain ones, and like one time I saw the panda, and there were only 10 people in the entire world who had the panda, because they had to win. They had to compete and win in the PvP World Championships. And so it was like they got a special thing, right? Yeah. And so this guy was like, I took so many screenshots of that. Seeing it in the wild was awesome.
It's the scope of it, right? I mean, the word epic has been murdered to death and back at this point, but
yeah. Thanks, adults. Thanks, old people. You guys thought it was so cool when we started using it in video games, and everything was epic. You guys ruined everything.
And again, to kind of start tying all this up, it's the human element that makes those types of achievements truly incredible. I love single player games, but the feeling of taking down that big boss in the world that built it up to be this super epic story in a single player is great. To do it in a multiplayer world where whether it be fighting with or against other people is just a completely different experience.
Yeah, it's
I mean, killing Denathrius, dude.
Yeah.
You play through the whole storyline of Shadowlands and you're like, this is a bad dude.
Yep.
Then you roll into his castle and you're like, okay, well, we're going to go explore this castle. You walk in and a dragon attacks you and you got to kill that guy. And you got to go down in the dungeon. You got to kill the guy with his dogs that are attacking you, and they all do different things. It's so just the theory of it is awesome that you just like work your way through this castle. And then, okay, great. You've destroyed the castle. You make it all the way up to the top, Mario style, and then you get there and it's like Denathrius, and you're like,
yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I guess I'll try and frame it a little bit better. In a single player game, if a boss just stomps you, you either understand you did something completely wrong, or you're just like, okay, I'm not high enough level. I need to come back later.
Yep. Those are literally your only options.
Your options, yeah.
And in a WoW raid, in an MMO experience with larger groups, you go in and if you try to do that single player, you would get stomped and you'd realize that your only option is to get help from other players.
And then you go in and you do it with 20 people and you have to be well coordinated and you have to everybody has to know what's going on. Everybody has to, because random elements apply to random people. You're going to end up with chains on you and another person, and if you aren't standing right next to each other, you're both dead.
Yeah, that.
And it's very difficult when it's like, okay, you think, oh, how hard is it to stand next to somebody, and then things start falling out of the sky on you, and both of your instincts kick in. Or how are you?
Goes right.
Exactly. And then that chain just goes and snaps in half, and then you both die. And then it's a tremendous challenge. And my favorite part of gaming these days is playing with friends and accomplishing something cool. I love the teamwork aspect of it. It's my favorite part of it's why I've like single player gaming is something I only sparsely do. And I'm all about co-op gaming and gaming with other people now because I just want to do stuff that requires teamwork. And there's nothing that requires more teamwork than raid life, man. You even at our shitty low level where I don't know what I'm doing and I'm bad at the game, it's still a tremendous amount of fun.
Still scared of those big raids. I haven't done a big raid yet in 14, but I'm gonna have to soon because they open up basically like one of the worlds of the previous games. There's a whole, and you guys might be familiar with this, there's like a side Final Fantasy thing, the world of Ivalice, which is where like tactics and games like Vagrant Story, things that aren't even necessarily directly in the Final Fantasy world, except 12. That's the big one and I've come up, basically, I have that raid available to me. It's like, I want to go back to that world. I love that world from those old games that I played, but I'm scared. So y'all are giving me the courage. I'm finding the strength from the two of you and from the DNVR community here to just jump full on, because I feel like I've been 2/3 into this MMO pool, right? It would be unfair or inaccurate for me to say I'm a fan of MMOs. I've played one, but I'm very, very much enjoying it, and I think I'm right on that cusp there of getting into it fully in a way that you can experience it to its greatest extent. Because at this point, I'm basically experiencing it as a solo player who occasionally interacts with other people when I have to.
You should go to the raids, man. In Final Fantasy 14, I know it'll be hard because you're constantly panicking and trying not to poop your pants in raids the whole time.
Yeah,
but find a moment to look around the raid, because the Final Fantasy raids are beautiful. I mean, the artwork they put in there is amazing. It's some of the best stuff I've ever seen in an MMO.
Yeah,
Michael, you haven't even started to learn to play WoW yet, my man.
Yeah, dude, the game doesn't even begin until you hit 60, dude.
Yeah. When you hit 60, then we can start to get into the real stuff. Frost. Like all you've done is learn how to run around and play your character a little bit. You haven't even unlocked the full potential of that class yet.
Oh, it's an amazing world. Well, I wanted to finish with this thought. Unless you have any, I mean, throw whatever else you've been thinking about throughout the day at me. But I wanted to ask you about the future of MMOs. Yeah, I just double checked this because I wanted to be sure. And yes, World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 14 are way above third place right now. No, fourth place is Guild Wars 2. Where did third place go? Oh, Elder Scrolls Online is in third place. But 14.
It's crazy to me that ESO is still a thing.
Yeah, right. Do those two franchises continue to dominate? Is there a new entrant into this field? And is there, we've talked before about the possibility of the Harry Potter thing, and then now it looks like that's eventually going to be a thing. There's talks about Star Wars open world. I don't know if it's Star Wars MMO. I know there
Star
is
Wars Galaxies.
Yeah, there is a Star Trek MMO that is.
Yeah, that's bad. Don't play that game.
There's like a free DC one too. We've talked before about how comic books. It's amazing that there isn't a phenomenal.
DC Online was really good for a while there.
It was.
I really liked it a lot. It was a lot of fun, and like, let's be real, like the concept of like create your character, and then you're like, are you a hero? Are you a villain? What are your powers going to be? How do you want to look? Like, what color is your cape? What's your jam? Book, right? It was awesome. I made Bronco Bot
in that game.
Bronco Bot.
But
yeah, it was awesome.
The combat in that game was a letdown for me, but
there were a lot of problems with it, but I like the concept of it was so cool, and the fact that it pulled up short was a big disappointment.
For the entirety of the modern MMO genre, WoW has been the king, and it's going to remain the king. Shadowlands has already been enough of a success that it will remain on top, and it will not be threatened for at least another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, until WoW's expansion after the next expansion.
Yep.
If the Harry Potter game is just amazing, there's not enough of a built-in audience there, you think, to launch it. It's hard for MMOs to go to the moon immediately, though, right? We've learned that with the 14th thing was unique, but it takes 5 years for you to even make a dent in the thing, so maybe not. I don't know.
The problem there is 90% of MMOs cannot survive being a subscription service.
Right.
A year or two later, they all go free to play, and the quality drops, and they just can't keep up with the big names anymore.
Yeah.
There are a couple names on the horizon. I struggle with Harry Potter because the problem with MMOs is the way they survive and be successful is they thrive heavily off of their hardcore fan base. And Harry Potter will bring in 1 billion casual players. Yeah. But will there be enough of a hardcore MMO fan base, not Harry Potter fan base, MMO fan base that sticks around?
You've got to, because those are the people who drive your subs, and you've got to have something for them to do every day. They've got to want to make alt characters, so you have to have multiple good classes. You can't just be like, well, you're a wizard and you did this, right? It's not, no.
Yeah.
You need strong classes. You need varied gameplay. You need really, really identifiable roles that are distinctly different from one another.
Yeah.
Way different play styles to appeal to all personalities. You need endgame content. You need daily content. You have to give your people reasons to play every single day.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. When you're talking about creating an MMO, you have to have a world that is worth being invested in on a daily basis, and at worst a weekly basis. Otherwise, they're not going to give you a monthly subscription.
It has to be baseline good. I've having played WoW for over a decade. If you come out with a game that has one gimmick that is super duper cool, WoW's going to copy that gimmick and put it in its game and be like, hey, we have that too now.
We can also do that because we can do everything in these games.
Yep.
Yeah. I could see something like if there was a really great Star Wars one, but or Star Trek one for that matter. Those are the kinds of things where there's a lot of potential.
Everyone
But there's
thought
also
the Old Republic was going to be that, and then it wasn't.
And it wasn't. It just wasn't. And so there's a lot of landmines for that as well. So I think you guys are probably right. We'll continue to see WoW be the king. 14 will continue to remain very, very strong, and these other guys will be doing their best to hang in there. I do wonder as we move more toward, as you talked about, like DLC and subscriptions and all this stuff, if there is a potential boom in the future of this just kind of becoming the normal way to game, where all games are kind of MMOs, right? I can see where, hey, I want to play a fighting game, but basically I'm going into an MMO world and then I find someone to go fight. I've got my character, they've got theirs. It's not that much different from what you're doing now, right? Or racing games, there are several that exist that way now. I feel like this could be just sort of be how people subscribe to games in the future.
We're bringing it back. The revitalization of the overworld in video games, where now instead of you on a Mario screen, it's 1,000 people in the overworld moving around trying to figure stuff out.
Right. Totally. All right. Well, yeah, that was fun. That was interesting, I think. I don't know. Let us know what you think out there. Whether you're in the comments here, hit us up on social medias. Make sure you're following the DNVR Gaming Twitter handle, also at Drew Kreisman, at AJ Hafley, at Rudo. Just what was your?
My name's it's Nathan _
it's still Nathan?
Rudolph. Yeah.
We gotta. Do you know who has at Rudo? Is there somebody out there?
I don't know who has it. No.
We need to launch a campaign to get you just at Rudo. This needs to happen.
Find out.
In the meantime. So let us know what your favorite MMOs are. If you think we left anything out of the conversation, always let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about on future episodes. One of the best ways to do that, if you don't happen to be here live as we're recording, or if you're not really big into the social media experience, but you are subscribed to the DNVR.com for all of our sports stuff, well, you can come hang out in the Discord, our private chat channel. Let us know all of your favorite video games, what you'd like to hear us talk on future episodes. Oh, Cygnus got a great point. Check if at Rubro is taken.
That's my burner.
Now.
That's my burner.
These are things that we got to make happen. And I promise I'll give you all an update once I've joined a guild and have taken the scary plunge of trying to be social with a video game, where normally I'm just trying to crush dudes at MLB The Show, and that's like the only interaction I have with people. And then I get mad when I don't. It's not the most healthy relationship I have with strangers online, arguably. So we'll see if we can do a little something about that. Thank you all for hanging out with us, listening to and or watching the show today. For AJ and Rudo, I'm Drew Kreisman. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.